friend of mine suggested I check out this movie called Slay, which came out in 2024. And then we had a discussion about how it might be cool to do an episode of Microgenres on slasher movies that feature drag queens or drag in its aesthetics. So, here we are. Sexuality and sex in general has always been a part of the horror genre. The death of innocence or the sin of exploring sex has been at the heart of slasher movies since the 80s. That having premarital sex was enough for you to deserve Jason Voorhees to impale you with a machete. Final girls who survive to the end have a purity or virginity that keeps them alive, and the lead girl doesn't get naked either.
She never showed her tits till she went legit.
Even vampires in movies and literature have sexuality baked into the formula. Because of the more conservative social dynamics in past decades, of course anything within gay or trans subject matter generally had to be disguised or tamped down to mere suggestion, easily denied. Like Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is riddled with nods to gay identity. Gay characters wouldn't be the main heroes and are often played for laughs. Sleepaway Camp has one of the most notorious end reveals of cross-dressing in the genre, but it brings us to a more common representation of cross-dressing in film, which is the very negative stigma surrounding it. Revealing a gender swap of a killer is represented in Psycho with Norman Bates wearing his mother's dress, which was based on real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who was also the inspiration for Texas Chainsaw Massacre and was not gay or trans, despite the connection made in media. De Palma's Dress to Kill, Sleepaway Camp, Silence of the Lambs all feature killers in drag. This seems obviously born out of the uncomfortable nature of anything out of the realm of the fragile and narrow traditional heteronormative sexual identity. Horror as a genre plays on our insecurities and anxieties, right? Like, Jaws represents our fears of sharks while swimming, despite that there is no killer shark like the one in Jaws. Now, I could say that Jaws is a poor representation of sharks in general, but they aren't people. If we were to look at a franchise like, say, Final Destination, getting on a plane in the first movie, going to the dentist in the second, the roller coaster in the third, these are all playing on our anxieties, scenarios that make us uncomfortable. I think the gay community has been scapegoated here with the same casual bigotry that every 90s sitcom did, making gay jokes, or the way that people used to say, no homo, unironically. Like, that wasn't that long ago. Honestly, we could do a whole episode on the terrible representation of queer people in horror movies, but, like, what fun would that be? So today, we're looking at a very new genre of films that celebrate drag culture specifically. These movies are full-fledged members, see what I did there, of the horror genre, but they also bring in the pageantry of drag queen culture. And, you know, some better than others. I also want to point out that drag isn't necessarily gay, and I don't want to get into it here because I'm not any kind of expert, but for those of you who need to hear it, putting on a dress does not make you gay. Sex is a complicated spectrum, and anybody trying to limit where you want to go in that spectrum is just wrong. Mind your business, as long as you're not hurting someone without their permission, do what makes you happy. Now, what makes me happy is movies. And in microgenres, we need parameters, right? Some rules. So we're going to look at all the drag slashers that I could find where the representation is positive. They got to be horror movies, they got to be slashers, and they got to have drag on screen, either a drag performance or a character who wears drag. Let's go! Okay. Spoiler alert. I could only find 4 movies and 1 short film that I thought fit the criteria for this video. So let me also put out what I think are the antecedents or the precursors to these films. I think the Rocky Horror Picture Show from 1975 is probably the film that most people have seen with a better representation of drag culture. The music, the theatricality, and of course Frankenfurter himself, played by the legendary Tim Curry. Rocky Horror is a cult film, and maybe the cult film, honestly. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I think this would be undisputed as an example of drag horror, even if it's also more comedy than horror. There is, of course, the parody angle, but so many elements of the film are send-ups to horror genre conventions and set pieces, like going to the haunted castle that evokes the Universal and Hammer horror movies, so much so that I feel safe making the reference despite not actually being a slasher film, and being a musical. Okay, the other horror icon of film that I think reps the drag community in a very good light is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Actress and comedian Cassandra Peterson has played Elvira for about 50 years now, and we can include all of the ancillary offshoots of her epic career, and not just like being an actual showgirl in Vegas and all that, but just Elvira as a franchise, if that's how you want to view it. There's the apex of Mistress of the Dark, the 1988 film, but then there's also the sequel, Elvira's Haunted Hills, the pilot for the sitcom The Elvira Show, her cookbook, her autobiography, her copious amounts of box sets and video releases of old public domain movies with Elvira actually hosting and cutting in from time to make jokes. There are the comics, both new and old, which I will obviously be doing a graphic adaptations video for. Toys and vinyl figures and statues and action figures and t-shirts and almost anything else you can imagine. Elvira is pop culture, and having a family-friendly icon on lunchboxes repping drag culture is definitely a positive. And if you're one of the people watching and thinking, she's a woman in a dress, that's not drag, then why don't we hear it from the queen herself?
And I'm curious for you, like, do you think of Elvira as a drag persona?
100%. Elvira is a drag queen. Always has been. I do everything drag queens do except tuck. Otherwise, there's absolutely no difference.
There we go. And if we look at Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, the movie, as an example, we can see so much of the drag ethos in her character. Being in control of her sexuality, being unapologetic about it, the constant affront of conservatives, but also just having fun despite all that, the great music, the impossibly high heels. Okay, now let's look at the list proper. We start with The Quiet Room, 2018. It's a short film at about 27 minutes in length and is available to watch for free on YouTube. It's sort of shades of Nightmare on Elm Street and Candyman. It sees our protagonist in a healthcare facility after a failed attempt at suicide. There he is haunted by this demon who's taking out his friends. While the film doesn't really showcase the drag aspects on screen, the cast does feature two performers, Katya and Alaska Thunderfuck. Greatest name ever, by the way. And for those interested, it's available on YouTube for free. 2019, Killer Unicorn. Now, this is a basic slasher formula that is just very, very, very gay.
Hey, Jolata. How you feeling?
The plot is an I Know What You Did Last Summer formula, but all the characters are gay.
And me. Oh, she needed some alone time, but now she's finally with us. We missed her.
The killer's dressed as a sexy unicorn in sparkly hot pants and a pink unicorn head mask and is very gay.
Who are you? Are you the new Go-Go Boy? Oh, honey. That's tucked to a T. That's not coming out till after the shows. But luckily, I don't mind ruining my lipstick.
Sort of feel like I'm going to rip out the hearts of these performers to say this, but the performances were so bad. Just so bad.
Why are you working? Go home. Colin can cover your shift.
Well, I'd rather be distracted about it here than think about it at home.
True that, true that.
I think this could be a situation where the budget is only affording a couple takes and then moving on, because all these scenes feel like, I don't know, like audition tapes, like they're saying the lines for the first time. But it isn't just the acting that's a bit clunky. The editing for the horror scenes feels slow and behind where the viewer is at that moment.
Fuck! That shit's like $20. What are you doing? Oh, fuck yeah. Are you fucking kidding me? That is so selfish. Whatever.
Although I did think it looked pretty good. It was really bright and colorful, and that might come off as patronizing, but it's not meant to be. Lighting and cinematography can lend to a film or detract from it, and I think the premise and the look go a long way. It's just the dialogue, acting, and editing needed a little bit more time and attention. I love the conceit that all these ladies become victims because he's just too hot to say no to. That's pretty great.
Raina, look, over there.
Oh,
In the mask?
Yeah, the really fucking hot dude in the mask.
Do you know his name?
Nope, but I'm gonna.
Aside from a host of pretty funny one-liners, I think the authenticity is likely to shine through. I can't speak to that personally, but the cast seems to be made of all LGBT community members. I've read reviews that praise this movie for being funny and over the top, but also disdain for the one-dimensional caricatures and for being over the top. The opening credits were interesting, with each performer's name being on screen as a text sent to a group chat discussing their friend's death and then moving the plot forward. I mean, there are definitely things to like about this movie. Alright, 2020, Death Drop Gorgeous, which was on Tubi, right? This movie also utilizes the text app bubbles on screen throughout. This movie's killer is using the app to line up these kills. It's a typical slasher structure, hanging out with the victims and waiting for our killer to appear and do their thing. I like the intention and the ambition. I can see the vision, but I don't think it quite executes that vision. At least on the look, which is very point-and-shoot home video. And then also the performances, which are not great. Or not good enough to pull me past the home video look.
Well, looks like we got ourselves a serial fag-killing vampire with a taste for blood.
Again, the colors do get going on screen, becoming more saturated, but it still doesn't quite escape the home video look. It's also an hour and 45 minutes, which is about 20 minutes too long. If you just cut out a chunk of it, maybe the pacing would have made it more forgivable that it wasn't that great. Now, where I think the movie excelled was in the gore. There is some gruesome death stuff. Blood and guts and penises being put into literal meat grinders. So A for effort there. And there's a bunch of drag in the movie, usually on stage and drag shows and karaoke. Lots of costumes and themes, but again, mired in lots of poor performances and poor production value. Linnea Quigley has a cameo, which is a nice little touch to bring a scream queen back to the slasher genre, but it's not going to save this movie. But I'm also not part of this community, and they could all be starving for representation in horror movies just like this. It's got pretty good reviews online, and I could see it developing a cult audience. Partly because there are so few movies like it, and cults form around quirky, flawed movies all the time. Alright, 2021, So Vam, which is on Amazon Prime, Google, and Shudder. It's got a comic shop. So that's a big win for me. Right off the bat, comic shops should be in more movies. And the movie filmed in Australia, so that means that we're seeing an Australian comic shop for the first time ever in a film. At least for me. That's pretty cool.
Yo,
Hey Layla,
what's the buzz, cuz?
same old. You got the new Creeper mag in?
Nah, fucking order's 2 days late. Spewing.
The main character dreams of leaving his conservative town to become a drag queen, but doesn't get there because he's turned by a group of vampires into one of the undead, and the way they do it is pretty great. I love the Bram Stoker analysis here.
Did you know vampires are just a racist construct?
Serious?
Totally. Take Dracula, for instance. It's literally about an Eastern European illegal immigrant getting into England, causing trouble and taking the woman.
The movie's filmed with little bits of political conversation throughout, but none quite hit the mark as well as this particular scene.
Before Dracula, vampires were depicted as the aristocracy, literally sucking the blood out of the poor. They were used to demonize women's sexuality, anything that suited the morality of the time.
I'm trying to break it up as best I can and cutting to the best parts and speeding it up so that we can avoid having to censor it or cut it, and I can still share it with you guys. So I hope this works out in the editing when I get there.
Bram Stoker was queer.
Really?
Bad time to be queer too. The Dracula character was based on a stage actor he had a serious crush on. Nothing could ever happen between them, so Bram was forced to write an entire novel about a decent, moral, straight Englishman being locked up and dominated by a handsome count who was described exactly like his crush. He was so afraid of his own desire that he had to turn it into an evil vampire.
Whoa.
The racist shit was just tacked on to appeal to a wider readership of dumb shits terrified of gypsies and Jews.
And I think this boldness and self-awareness gives the movie a stronger identity and presence to help overlook its shortcomings in other areas. So our crew of friendly vampires only feed on the blood of those who don't deserve theirs, and so we go to a gay conversion camp and watch guilt-free as they feed on gay conversion freaks. It's great.
So you lied to me!
We weren't.
When you lied to me, you lied to God!
One of those fucks is dinner.
Wait, I don't want to kill anyone.
Do you have any idea how many kids kill themselves every year because of this shit? It's like a fucking fascist re-education camp.
The visual style's pretty good, but the sound design, specifically the audio for the voices, feels like a lot of it was ADR'd in post-production. The score, this dreamy, pulsing synth, provides some nice atmosphere, and I really like the musical choices, but all the color and neon glowing in the frames adds so much production value. I wonder why that's a theme throughout most of these movies, is a great visual flair. Do you think it's a coincidence? No. Right. Now, some of the performers are clunky in places, but no more than a cult classic like Clerks. So I think it's forgivable and not all that bad. The runtime's only 73 minutes, so it never drags. Pun. But even so, the editing in places or choreography for the fight scenes could also use a little bit more work. There are a few on-stage drag sequences, and if I'm being honest, I kind of wanted something more. Like, I don't know, more dance moves, more of a stage show. It was just sort of there. I think that the best of this movie is the introduction of our hero into the Lost Boys tribe, learning the rules, sniping lines of dialogue at each other.
I need to go.
You need to feed. Harley, go get yourself a skinhead from that new gang house downtown.
I like the point of view the movie has. It's fresh. And hanging out in the comic shop, of course.
Guess the movies are wrong.
The movies always get it wrong. I don't know why. There's plenty of bloodsuckers in Hollywood.
Alright, Slay 2024. So the main event, the reason this video exists is because some friends suggested I watch Slay after they saw it and loved it. I gotta concur. It felt very much like Feast from 2005, where survivors hole up in a bar in the middle of nowhere during a monster attack. And also, you can feel the joy in the film being made, similar to Feast as well. It's energetic and fresh and just good cinema. It also shares that Feast plot set up with From Dusk Till Dawn, and now Sinners as well, where the first half of the movie gives no hint that this is a monster movie until halfway through, when we shift genres and now we're in a horror movie. In this case, our Ramblers are a troupe of drag queens who, like the Blues Brothers before them, are booked to the wrong venue and have to play in front of a bunch of country hicks when all of a sudden they're in the middle of a vampire attack.
What the fuck you think you're doing, right? Oh! Get him off me!
The action, the gore, the stuff you'd expect from a genre movie, and the comedy elements are all on point. This is a crowd pleaser movie. It's funny, but it's also bloody. It handles the complex social issues with some style and attitude, and it really works. Like, the main cast are alum from RuPaul's Drag Race with some really great names. Trinity the Tuck as Manna Soufflé. Heidi in Closet plays Robin Banks. Crystal Method is Bella Du Bois. And Caramel is Olive Wood. Now, the best compliment I can give this movie is that the filmmakers didn't try to bring a complete cinematic vision to life. They did it. This is a fully realized big screen horror adventure, and I got no notes. Maybe I'm feeling this way because the other movies on the list were far more independent or lower budget or rough around the edges, and this movie shines all the more in comparison to them. This movie is the best of all the modern movies on our list, just on a quality level. This is really well done. Slay is the king or queen of the genre for sure, the belle of the ball. If you're going to see one movie on this list, make it Slay. By the way, I'm going to point out, like I do every time I notice it, but Slay is also a Canadian production, and it's a Tubi exclusive. I wish there was a DVD, because I've seen this movie maybe 3 times on Tubi, and I don't care for streaming. But, I mean, at least it's free. So that's the list. I'm sure there will be more in the future. Feel free to list any that I missed down in the comments and hit the subscribe button. My big complaint for this video is no DVDs, no Blu-rays. Like, come on, man. Let's get physical, ladies. Where's the representation going to be if you're not going to have a collection on the shelf? Even trying to find downloadable copies is a real challenge. So the entire microgenre is being held behind the paywalls of those streaming platforms. Blink twice if you need help, but you can't ask for it. Well, except for Tubi, which is free. Right? How great is that? I'm going to say that 1,000 times, but there's not a lot of free things left. Tubi has in no way endorsed or sponsored this content, nor are they even aware of my existence in any capacity. But whether or not they know it, I'll be back next week. I'll see you next week.